Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk about all the written work we do in this class. And there's a fair amount. For each written assignment, there are guidelines in D2L, and I stress you need to read those guidelines and work through the assignment as the guidelines tell you to do. But I've also found that sometimes students want a little more reassurance about what they're doing. And so that's what this video is going to be about. I'm just going to talk generally about the assignments and what I'm looking for in them, okay? We are going to talk about the podcast activities. We're going to talk about the book essay, and we're going to talk about the map activities. Now, big picture here. What is it I'm really looking for in anything that you write? What I'm looking for is that you are making connections between what we're learning in class and what you're writing about. Connections. You're using the concepts from what you've read. You're really understanding what you've read and applying it to whatever the assignment is. Now, I do this and I care about this because human geography and cultural geography in particular is not just textbook knowledge. It's not just sort of some analytical framework that academics have put together. It has relevance in our lives. And that's why I want us to do this. I want you all to make connections between what you're learning in this class and what you're writing about. And that's the big picture. Okay, so the first assignment we're going to talk about is the podcast activities. And there's two of them, okay? So you're going to get to listen to podcasts in this class. And I do this because I think the people that put podcasts out there, that design them, that interview in podcasts and really engage in that form of media are really talking about culture in the present moment. And they really give us an idea of the diversity in the US in a very contemporary format. So I really love listening to podcasts. They're a great way for you to connect in your lives with whatever the podcaster is talking about. And they're a great platform to discuss cultural geography. So I'm going to give you a list of potential podcasts. You need to look through that list, choose one that interests you. You do not need to listen to every episode of that podcast, but listen to a few episodes because you want to choose an episode that is relevant, that you're going to be able to make cultural geography connections with. So it might take a little bit of time to find that episode, okay? Now, when you do your write-up and when you submit this activity, there are 4 things that I'm looking for that I will be grading you on, okay? The first one is a description of the podcast. This should not be very long, just a nice paragraph. What is the podcast about? And what was the episode you listened to about? That sort of just is an introduction, set the stage, okay? Description. The second thing you need to do is talk about concepts and ideas that you've learned about in this class and how they relate to this podcast. How do they apply, okay? What is this podcast showing you that links to and connects with what you've been learning, okay? Third thing. Reflection, okay? This is your chance to really talk yourself openly about, I was surprised. I had no idea this is this way. Just give me a sense of either surprises or some sort of reflection of how you've connected with this podcast. And then lastly, and this is very important and often gets left out, how does this podcast inform your understanding of cultural identity? Okay, that's what we're looking at in this class in cultural geography, our identities that relate to culture. In the podcast activities, you'll be looking either at race, gender, ethnicity, or rural contexts. Later in the semester, we'll look at rural spaces. So how does this podcast inform that in its sort of contemporary platform? The book essay. This is a major essay that you will write in this class, okay? So you need to spend some time on it, and you need to go over the guidelines and make sure you know what is expected and what you are doing in this. I have made a video that's called Intro to Books That tells you about all the books you could possibly choose. There's, I think, 5 or 6 of them. I'm not going to go over each book in this video, okay? I'm going to go over what's expected when you write up your essay, okay? Now, there are 5 parts that I want to see in this essay. The first thing I want to see is an introduction. The introduction should introduce the major theme of your paper, why you're writing this paper, what it's really about. Okay, give me a nice introduction. Set this paper up, okay? So that I will be like, oh, interesting. I want to hear what's going on, okay? The second thing you want to do, too, is a summary, okay? The summary should be just a paragraph. Do not take a whole page to summarize this book, okay? Just a paragraph. It just lets me know that you really read the book. Yeah, so that I know, okay? So you want a summary of the book. Not too much, okay? Third thing, this one is really important. I want to see that you've done some research into the historical background of that book. So all our books are about characters in specific places in the world, okay? You need to do some background research about those places so you can really understand that story, because each of those books relates to the real world that's happening, what happened in that area, the historical context of that area. So I want to see a good historical background section in this paper. You need to have citations. You need to look for information that helps you understand the historical context. A couple of the books are fictitious, but they're based off a particular place, okay? So make sure that you make that connection, okay? Then the fourth thing, and this is the majority of the paper, is your critical analysis, okay? Again, taking the ideas, concepts that we learn in cultural geography, linking them to whatever is happening in the book, and creating some sort of understanding from that, some greater understanding. That's what I'm looking for. Some critical analysis of the story and how it relates to cultural geography. And then lastly, a conclusion. Sums everything up, wraps everything up, okay? So I'm really looking for these 5 things in this paper. Do not do them in that order. That makes it easier for me to look through and understand what's going on in your paper, okay? My hope is that you'll really enjoy reading a book, a novel, and this will be a great window into culture and cultural geography in a particular place. Okay, so the next written assignment I'm going to talk about is the cultural landscape assignment, okay? Geographers, cultural geographers in particular, have really fun looking at physical landscapes and understanding how culture has made imprints on that landscape. So the material presence of that landscape and how people have formed and shaped that landscape. And landscapes tell stories. They tell narratives. They tell histories of who was there. And so cultural geographers really like to look at places and understand the people that evolved and lived and experienced those places. Now, I have a video that goes into more details about cultural landscapes. It's a TED Talk by a cultural geographer. I stress you need to watch that video. And she will go through various things that you can see in the landscape as they relate to cultural geography, okay? I'm going to go over 4 things that are going to be really important for you to look at in the landscape you choose, okay? So you're going to choose a landscape for this exercise. It could be somewhere in your neighborhood. It could be a place that you're very familiar with. You get to choose, okay? But you're going to need to do some research on this place and understand what has been happening in this place for a while, okay? Once you've chosen that place, that landscape, there are 4 things that I want you to talk about in this paper, okay? The first one, the history of who occupied and worked that land, that landscape. Where in that landscape can you see something about the people that lived there in the past, okay? That's that discussion. The people that occupied that area, that maybe worked and sculpted and transformed that area, that piece of land. You'll have to do some history digging to figure that out. The second one, ethnic signatures. This is the idea that different ethnic groups, when they come into the landscape in a place, they leave their presence there, okay? They leave symbols, they leave names of buildings, functions of buildings. A great example of this is I was just in New York and I did a little tour of Harlem. And Harlem was originally occupied by a population of Jewish heritage. There were lots of temples there with the Star of David. That population has since left, and now there are lots of churches in Harlem with little Stars of David. So that ethnic signature is still in the landscape, okay? So you'll want to look at your landscape that way. The third thing is contemporary actions and values. How is that landscape showing us what's going on right now? What people are doing right now? What are they valuing right now? Okay, that's the third. And the last one, and this may be the most challenging, but give it your best and talk to me if you need to. Impacts of spatial scale, okay? How are local processes or national processes or international processes or global processes impacting that landscape, okay? That's what you'll want to look at in the impacts of spatial scale. So I'm looking for a paper that does these four things, okay? This is a very extensive amount of things that you'll have to do, but I really look forward to seeing your investigations of landscapes that you're familiar with. Okay, so the last activity I'm going to talk about is not a lot of writing, but I just wanted to mention it here so that you can understand what's going on. So this is the map activity, okay? And there's 4 map activities in this class. And in each activity, you get 2 regions of the world, and you need to map out various geographic features in those 2 regions. So that's oceans, rivers, major mountain ranges, country names. I think those are the 4, okay? So you do that on the 2 regions. That's pretty straightforward. Most students do fine on that, okay? Now, the second part of the map activity is where there's a little bit of writing, and sometimes it needs a little more clarification. So here goes. That's what this is. So you're going to take one of the regions you've been assigned in that activity, okay? And you're going to map out, show the spatial pattern of a theme that you've learned about in cultural geography in that module, okay? So if we're studying migration, if that's the module we're studying, then maybe you're going to map out migration, internal or external or international migration in that particular region, okay? This means you're going to do some research to find out what's out there. You may actually find a map that shows you a spatial pattern of a particular theme, okay? That's fine. Use that. That's fine. You'll need to cite the data that you find and that you use in your map. And then you'll need, here's the writing part, you'll need to write a description up about that particular geographic theme and how it is expressed in the region that you're looking at, okay? So that's the assignment. Super important key. First part, you do both regions that are assigned. Those are your geographic features. The second part, you just do one region. Choose either of the 2 regions assigned. You only need to do one to map out that geographic theme, okay? Good luck.